The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
How many hours of oxygen are left that you know of or that you can estimate right now on the submersible? And does it have to be approved or regulated?
Sure. So first of all, it's an estimate, right? Because we know from the data we were using as a starting point was 96 hours. We know at this point we're approximately about 41 hours.
41 hours left.
Yes.
And does it have to be approved or regulated? Does submersible, does it go through anything that you know of?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact technical piece of that. We know there's about 40 hours of breathable air left based on that initial report. Again, that was just the initial report based on 96 hours from when the vessel.
That's the sound of U.S. Coast Guard officials updating the press on the search and rescue efforts to recover the expedition vessel known as the Titan, which was lost, or rather lost contact with its support ship just 1 hour and 45 minutes into its expedition dive that started on Sunday. They were attempting to travel some 13,000 feet below the surface in order to visit the wreckage and explore the wreckage of the Titanic. And just some 1 hour and 45 minutes into the dive on Sunday, the support ship lost contact with them. I have more audio about a previous expedition from the same company, same ship that lost contact with this team just a year ago, and also some audio that really explains how risky this was from the beginning, particularly with the design of the ship. We'll get into all of that, but as of that update, which was provided yesterday, June 20th, they had only 40 hours of oxygen remaining out of a 96-hour supply of oxygen, which is scheduled to run out tomorrow, which would be Thursday, June 22nd, is the estimated end of the oxygen supply for those 5 individuals who are trapped inside of the Titan. There are reports of knocking sounds being detected by Canadian air vessels. This search and rescue operation has become an international affair. The Canadian search vessel, an aircraft that is able to detect sounds underneath the ocean, detected knocking or banging sounds that came at 30-minute intervals. This has given hope to the search and rescue team that they may be able to find those 5 individuals, including the pilot, a Pakistani billionaire and his 19-year-old son, a French explorer who is an expert on the Titanic, and the 5th passenger, or rather the 4th passenger, in addition to the pilot, is a Dubai-based businessman. There's a lot of commentary that's going around about the nature of this particular incident and this potential tragedy. There are hopes that they would be found alive, but when you can just consider the vastness of the ocean, the depth, the pressure, the danger that's involved for the search and rescue team, and even the limitations. There was one particular Navy vessel that was being used in the search and rescue operation that could only go down 2,000 feet. Well, they're estimating that this vessel went down some 13,000 feet. They think that they got relatively close to the Titanic, which tremendously complicates the search and rescue efforts. So this was a risky expedition in the first place. But the commentary that's going on right now really hinges on 2 things. The cavalierness with which a lot of people are engaging the conversation about the potential death of these individuals, and the fact that they're, billionaires and the rich people doing rich, risky things. I don't really want to comment there just yet, and I don't know that I have a lot of commentary there in the first place. I do. You all know me well enough to know that I err on the side of humanity, thinking about what it must be like for those 5 individuals who are trapped in that vessel, if they're still alive at this point, hoping for some type of miracle, hoping for a rescue. But I will give some thought to the riskiness involved, the risk that they took in a vessel that was almost itself cavalierly put together. I want you to listen to this report from a reporter on CBS who ventured alongside the vessel a year ago. Now, he didn't go down into the ocean with the same vessel, but he remained on the support ship, and he reviewed the waiver that you had to sign, as well as some of the technology that was inside of the vessel. So listen into the description of the 21-foot vessel that these 5 individuals are trapped in as search and rescue efforts continue.
An experimental submersible vessel that has not been approved or certified by any regulatory body and could result in physical injury, disability, emotional trauma, or death. Where do I sign? Inside, the sub has about as much room as a minivan.
So this is not your grandfather's submersible. We only have one button, that's it. It should be like an elevator. You know, it shouldn't take a lot of skill.
The Titan is the only 5-person sub in the world that can reach Titanic depths, 2.4 miles below the sea. It's also the only one with a toilet, sort of. And yet, I couldn't help noticing how many pieces of this sub seemed improvised.
We can use these off-the-shelf components.
I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
The only commentary I really will give is the fact that there's no way on God's green earth or in the blue water that I would go down inside of a vessel that is go down 2.4 miles in a vessel that's guided by a game controller that's not even, it looked like an off-brand game controller, like one that you would get at Dollar Tree. And I'm not trying to make light of the situation or make fun of the individuals who are trapped in this very dire situation. I just think that I could not possibly sign that waiver. I could not possibly put myself at that. First of all, I don't have $250,000 to take that trip. Okay. Second of all, if I had read the same waiver that reporter just read, I would quickly walk away for several reasons. Number one, it's a vessel that has not been approved by any regulatory body. And if there's any commentary to be given, it is the necessity for regulation, right? There's a role that regulation plays in society. And one of the number one things that the rich do is use their wealth to get rid of regulation. Now, I'm not asserting that as any implications in terms of this particular story, but just generally speaking, regulations save lives. And I just could not possibly, again, don't have the $250,000 in the first place to be in that situation, but to put your life into the hands of such a risky endeavor. Listen to this same report from CBS News about a year ago that indicates that when they attempted an expedition a year ago, they got lost for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
The dive was a go.
Titan sitting at 3742 meters, reports on bottom.
But that was the last of the good news.
And I said, do you know where we are? 100 meters to the bow, then 470 to the bow. If you are lost, so are we.
There's no GPS underwater, so the surface ship is supposed to guide the sub to the shipwreck by sending text messages.
Turn 30 degrees right?
Probably, 30 degrees.
But on this dive, communications somehow broke down. The sub never found the wreck.
We were lost. We were lost for 2.5 hours.
Rush says he'll offer those passengers a free do-over next year.
Yeah, that would have been enough for me. I would not have needed a do-over, not after being lost 2 hours and 45 minutes previously. But I digress. We're wishing the best and hoping the best for the recovery of these 5 individuals as international efforts to recover the Titan continue. We'll keep you updated with more information.
We all know this to be true. The left weaponizes race whenever they're losing an argument. That does my grandfather a disjustice, an injustice. It's disrespectful.
I think he meant to say a disservice, but who am I to judge? I mix up my words all the time. That was Republican Senator Tim Scott, who is a presidential candidate. He was performing in front of a Fox News audience, a predominantly white, almost all white audience, for a town hall meeting. He's running for president, knowing full well that he won't even get 1% of the vote during the primaries. But he is doing exactly what he is designed to do. The entire purpose of Tim Scott's campaign is to provide racial cover for racists. As he made this statement, the camera panned to the audience, and an audience full of white, old conservative men and women were so happy to hear a black man stand up there and say that the only reason we talk about race in this country is because what?
The left weaponizes race whenever they're losing an argument.
Yeah, that's the only time we talk about race, Tim Scott. Not when police officers are killing us, not when the criminal justice system targets us, not when Flint still doesn't have any water, not when racists are marching all around this country. Critical race theory is being used as a cudgel. There's a war on blackness in the form of saying woke. You know, we only mention it when we can't win a debate. Here's the funniest thing about this is that these people don't actually want to debate the left. They don't actually want, what they want are sound bites that they can use and cut and take out of context. And we're dealing with a group of people who don't have any basis in objective reality. They are willing to twist and bend any truth into a talking point for the benefit of their political agenda. Their hypocrisy is the point. So it's funny because, one, they do not really want to debate in good faith. What they want is a performance. What they want is a spectacle, something that they can just generate clicks off of. And how do they generate those clicks? Well, by engaging in some of the most dishonest, ahistorical, and disingenuous arguments that they can come up with. But most importantly to me, the price of being a black conservative is just too high for me. It's just too rich for my blood. You have to give up so much of your soul, you know, to be on stage and in a room full of white people saying things to make them feel better and to feel better about themselves, especially because what they want to hear that black man say is anything he can come up with to undermine the fight for justice on behalf of black people. He is literally there to make white folks feel good. And what makes those white conservatives feel good is to see a black man who will attack the black community. That's what makes them feel good. That is what gets you the big checks. That's what gets you a nice home and a nice car with a nice bank account and everything that you need. It gives you a nice notoriety. It gets you the ability to run for president on the Republican ticket, knowing full well you'll never win, but you'll get enough support to sell a book, to become a New York Times bestseller. Right? To get the fame that you desire so much. I'm sorry, the price of being a black conservative is just too high.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. I want to read to you from ProPublica, who has been doing some amazing reporting over the last year into the corruption of our Supreme Court, particularly Justice Clarence Thomas and now Justice Samuel Alito, who took a luxury fishing vacation with GOP billionaire who later had cases before the Supreme Court. Again, this is reporting from ProPublica. Definitely suggest that you check out their publication, generally speaking, but this report specifically. In early 2008, July 2008, Samuel Alito stood on the riverbanks in a remote corner of Alaska. The Supreme Court justice was on a vacation at a luxury fishing lodge that charged more than $1,000 a day. And after catching a king salmon nearly the size of his leg, Alito posed for a picture. To his left, a man stood beaming, Paul Singer, a hedge fund billionaire who has repeatedly asked the Supreme Court to rule in his favor in high-stakes business disputes. Singer was more than a fellow angler. He flew Alito to Alaska on a private jet. If the justice chartered the plane himself, the cost would have exceeded $100,000 one way. In the years that followed, Singer's hedge fund came before the court at least 10 times in cases where his role was often covered by the legal press and mainstream media. In 2014, the court agreed to resolve a key issue in a decade-long battle between Singer's hedge fund and the nation of Argentina. Alito did not recuse himself from the case and voted with the 7-1 majority in Singer's favor. The hedge fund was ultimately paid $2.4 billion. That's not a bad return on investment to get you a Supreme Court justice on your side. Continuing on, Alito did not report the 2008 fishing trip on his annual financial disclosures. By failing to disclose the private jet flight Singer provided, Alito appears to have violated a federal law that requires justices to disclose most gifts, according to ethics law experts. And again, that's reporting from ProPublica. And unfortunately, this, which in any other generation would be a tremendous story, headline news, it would be a major controversy. This story barely goes noticed. It barely goes noticed because, one, the nature of our 24-hour news cycle, but also because we have become accustomed to this level of corruption from our Supreme Court justices. We just got through talking, maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his luxury gifts and vacations that he took and received from another Republican billionaire donor. And despite his actions, Clarence Thomas and now Samuel Alito, despite their actions being clear ethics violations, nothing has been done. No accountability has been brought to them because, well, the Supreme Court seems to be above the law. I mean, how else do you interpret this? Any other level of our federal judiciary would be held accountable because they actually have ethics codes. They actually are held to account. They can be held accountable. But it is our Supreme Court that has demonstrated that it simply does not have to abide by the same law as lower courts, as the same ethics measures as the lower courts. And the just glaring quid pro quo that we've seen take place with these two particular conservative justices, and the fact that they have led to, in this case with Samuel Alito, led to awards of $2.4 billion for this billionaire, right? He spent $500,000 courting and flying out Samuel Alito to turn around and get $2.4 billion worth of a decision from the Supreme Court. Now, I also want you to keep in mind that this is the same court that we have to give such a level of deference to, that whatever decision they make, that becomes the law of the land. It's not law as a result of Congress passing it and the Senate passing it and then the president signing it into law. It's the law of the land because it has the force of law, because we as a nation have agreed to the power of the Supreme Court. I mean, we have acknowledged and recognized with so much precedent that the decisions that they make carry the force of law. But what happens when the people making those decisions are transparently corrupt? Well, I'll tell you what happens. They continue to do it. It becomes normalized. It becomes baked into the system. And then at that point, it becomes even more acute. You will find we are going to see more and more instances of our Supreme Court justices, at least the conservative side, because I can tell you one thing for certain. If this had been a liberal leaning, progressive leaning justice, there would be some accountability. There will be, because Republicans have demonstrated that they are more than happy. Conservatives are more than happy to live in a perpetual state of hypocrisy. They do not care, and they won't even bat an eye about holding a liberal leaning justice accountable, while just completely ignoring the fact that we have now concrete evidence that two conservative justices on the Supreme Court have violated every ethical code you can imagine. But because they sit on the Supreme Court, there's nothing anyone is willing to do. There's nothing that anyone can do unless the U.S. House of Representatives decides to use its power to impeach these two justices. And we know that's not going to happen because they're so busy trying to impeach Joe Biden over something frivolous. And we'll explore those stories as well right after this. I learned something new yesterday. I'm always learning, always studying, finding out something new. But this particular thing that I learned new just came into my timeline. Ironically, just before Elon Musk decided to ban the word cis, CIS, on Twitter, I found a video on Instagram that explained the origins of the word cis, which is just a Latin prefix that simply means on this side. Cisgendered simply means that you are on this side of the gender spectrum, as opposed to trans, which means you are on the other side of the gender spectrum. Didn't know that. It was, I always loved learning something new. Well, ironically enough, as fate would have it, later on the day, I learned what cis actually meant, in terms of the actual Latin definition of the prefix. Elon Musk took to Twitter and said the following, quote, "Repeated targeted harassment against any account will cause the harassing accounts to receive, at minimum, temporary suspicions. The words cis or cisgender are considered slurs on this platform." You heard that right. Using the Latin prefix cis or cisgender is now considered a slur on Twitter. Why, you may ask? Well, because there is an all-out war against the ability of transgender people to simply exist. This is just another detail in that war. It is a detail in the propaganda campaign that is the leading tip of the spear of this war, right? It is the attempt to make everyone fear and loathe and hate the trans community. And so now they have made up, Elon Musk specifically has declared that cisgender or cis, the Latin prefix, we're banning and canceling Latin prefixes, folks. That's where we are. Now, notice that when he came back to Twitter, the N-word use went up some 500%, but he wants to make sure that we have enough room for free speech for people to do that. And not to mention that he's given power to people to misgender individuals and to dead name them. Anything that these brutish beasts on the other side of this equation, of this argument, can use to harm, to be cruel, to insult someone who is transgender, they will engage in it on Twitter without any ramifications. But if you use the Latin prefix cis as a way to describe a person who is not trans, which are literally just the opposing sides of a Latin prefix, right? They're the opposite sides of the same coin. You're either cis on this side of the gender spectrum or you're trans on the, but that's an insult. We have reached a level of absurdity in this country that, not only in this country, all around the world, that I don't know that we can honestly come back from without some jolt to our system. The anger and hatred has become a hallmark. Don't get me wrong. We do know that anger and hatred and bigotry have long been a hallmark of this country, but we're living in a renaissance. We're living in a time where you can advance your career by how bigoted you can become. You can make more money by how bigoted you can be. You are given the opportunity to get more influence and more power based on how bigoted you can be. It is a renaissance of cruelty. It is a renaissance of white supremacy, and it is a renaissance of bigotry like we haven't seen in our lifetimes. And that's the entire point. The entire point is to control the population through hatred and bigotry. They understand, conservatives know full well that their greatest mobilizing tool on their side of the aisle is hate. They know full well that the best way to get people to the polls on their side of the equation is either through bigotry, hatred, or fear. This is the 3 tiers of their campaign. This is the 3 tiers of their entire ideology. This is how they mobilize their groups. And Elon Musk now say, he purchased Twitter for the purposes of free speech, has now waded into the conversation to say, I'm going to use my $44 billion investment to penalize anyone who uses the scientific definition, right? The designation, the Latin prefix cis, that's the slur. But, the N-word, we got to examine that on a case-by-case basis. Oh, you mean, misgendering somebody? That's totally fine. Dead naming somebody? That's totally fine. But to refer to them using the Latin prefix that is a scientific designator of those individuals who are not trans, that's a bridge too far. The absurdity of it all.
Pretty white TT, 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 pretty white TT.
Yesterday in the Patrons Only episode, I covered the story of far right-wing pastor Kent Christmas, which is an amazing last name, talking about, well, I'll let you hear it for yourself. My best interpretation of this clip is that he was calling for Christians to be more like Muslims and put suicide bombs on their chests so that they could be good examples of Christians. He seems to say we took him out of context. Not me personally, but particularly Right Wing Watch, the team that pulled the clip, and we discussed it yesterday. So let's listen to the clip. I want you to hear it for yourself. Did we misinterpret his words?
You want to know why the Muslim faith has had its advancements? It's because the Muslims were willing to die for their belief. They were willing to strap bombs to their chest. They believed in the afterlife. God, give us some men and women that'll get a hold of some passion in their spirit that says, I will lay down my life for the gospel.
I'm not sure that there's a lot of ways to interpret that other than him encouraging Christians to put suicide vest on, and maybe not suicide vest, but just violence, particularly speaking. Did you get the same impression? Because apparently when he went back to church the following Sunday, this just past Sunday, the kerfuffle, the ruckus around the backlash was so much that he decided to claim that he didn't actually say that. Listen in.
I do not condone violence to anything as a solution. And this last week, I don't know how many saw the posts that we are advocating that you would put on chest bombs and to blow up things, and it created quite a firestorm.
I have to pause before I play any more. It's the audible gasp in the audience that really trips me out, because this is literally the same audience that sat and heard him preach this the week before. But now that he's denying it, they're like, how dare they accuse you of saying something that you literally said? Let's keep listening.
So I want to say we're peaceful, we're loving, and that we believe in the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ as our greatest weapon. And Paul said this, for the weapons of our warfare are not natural weapons, but they are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. So it's a shame that I even have to address this, but evil people don't play by the rules.
I'm sorry. I don't know if he's describing himself here, because the rules say if you are caught on video saying something that you don't get to come back, well, unless you're a conservative Christian, because they, of course, always come back and deny literally what they just said the week before. Maybe I heard him wrong. Let's listen one more time.
You want to know know why the Muslim faith has had its advancements? It's because the Muslims were willing to die for their belief. They were willing to strap bombs to their chest. They believed in the afterlife. God, give us some men and women that'll get a hold of some passion in their spirit that says, I will lay down my life for the gospel.
Not many ways that you can interpret that. It seems like a direct comparison and a call to Christians, evangelicals, white evangelicals specifically, to engage in their politics in the same fashion that quote unquote jihadists do, right? Suicide bombers. But, you know, when the heat came on, he decided to back off and say, I didn't really say that. Maybe that's a win in itself. He's scared to stand by his own words. Kent Christmas. Patrons, stay tuned. Everyone else, we'll see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.